Hi, my name is Paul Vanderklay. I'm the pastor of Livingstone's Christian Reformed Church, and this is the second video in a series where I want to talk about the elements, how the Bible tells stories, the elements of this story, so that when we read the Bible, it can be as rich and powerful and grip us in the ways that it gripped its original hearers. Now, in my last video, I talked about how God sets the stage in Genesis 1, where you have the firmament or the vault, where you have the waters below. Of course, there's the waters below, the waters above. Waters are separated, the waters from the dry land, and heaven is above, and God creates a garden, and the man and the woman are placed in the garden. Now, one of the things that an ancient person would notice, but most modern readers fail to notice, is what is absent from the garden. Something is absent from the garden that everyone in the ancient world would have assumed would be present in all of their lives, and that would be an altar. Now, why is there no altar in the garden? Now, people who are educated and taught Reformed doctrine would say there's no altar in the garden because there's no sin in the garden, and that's true. But we have to dig a little bit deeper into this altar question. There's no altar in the garden because we have to think about what altars do, how altars function, and how altars fit into this whole picture. There's no altar in the garden because there's no divorce between heaven and earth. The first altar you find will be in Genesis 4, where Cain and Abel are both offering sacrifices, and Cain does not feel like his sacrifice is pleasing to God, and that then develops the rift between his brothers, which will end in murder. That's very instructive if we understand that there's no altar in the garden. Well, there's no altar in the garden. The man and the woman are there, and they're naked, they're innocent, and in fact, God walks in the garden in the cool of the day, as the older translations would say. The picture very much here is that heaven is in fact the control room of earth. Heaven is in a sense the center of earth. It's the center of power. It's the center of action. Heaven is the source of earth, and earth is in a sense the backyard or the royal garden or the palace garden of earth. And so the great King of heaven will come and walk and enjoy the garden and meet with the gardeners, which are the man and the woman. And of course, the story then goes in Genesis 3 about what happens between them. Now, what happens, in fact, is that the man and the woman rebel, and they want to take the garden in their own way. Now, anybody who knew King Nebuchadnezzar, the garden would in a sense be the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Anyone who knew an ancient king who heard that the gardeners were no longer gardening as the king wants would know what would happen to rebellious gardeners. Rebellious gardeners would be killed. Now, it's very interesting, if these are your assumptions, to then reread Genesis 3 and ask, how does God treat these rebellious gardeners? Does he kill them? Again, read the book of Daniel, read about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was very willing to kill people on far less provocation than gardeners deciding they wanted to take the garden in a different way from the king. But the king doesn't do that. The king is, in fact, very patient, very gracious, very long-suffering. He will, in fact, exile the gardeners, but what he does is really quite dramatic. While they, in fact, are kicked out of the garden and are sent into the field, the king does not destroy the rebellious gardeners for the sake of the garden. In a sense, the king leaves the garden and the palace grounds in the hands of the rebels. Now, what kind of king would do this? Again, if you would say, read Luke 15 about the father whose son says, I want my inheritance. Everyone would expect that father to beat his son black and blue and say, you don't ask questions like that. If you ever ask a question like that again, I'll kill you. But the father doesn't do this. The king of the garden doesn't do this. But what starts is an exile. What starts is a divorce. What starts is a rupture between heaven and earth. And this is why in Genesis 4, what you find is Cain and Abel, and they are making an altar. Now, what's the function of the altar? The function of the altar is, in fact, to bridge the divorce between heaven and earth. On my next video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about altars and how they function and how they fit into the mental map of the Bible and why they worked for the ancient people and how we can understand it. Again, if you find this video helpful, please leave me a comment. Let me know any questions that you might have if you want me to follow up on something. It'll be in my Facebook page. I'll put it on my YouTube channel. I'll put it on the church's YouTube channel, and we'll see where we can go from this. So thanks for watching.